of cones and various like seed things from trees that I have accumulated. And I thought we could just take a look at some of them and I could talk a bit more about trees, I guess. Yeah, so like without further ado, I'm gonna start with these spruce cones. I believe that they are all spruce cones. I cannot be 100% sure because I'm not like brilliant at hiding stuff and I couldn't tell you which spruce they belong to, although they do look potentially like 3 different types of spruce. But yeah, I guess we'll start with the baby one. So first we have this tiny baby spruce cone. We actually went on a walk the other day and there were lots of spruce trees with I guess cones that were more like this size, but they hadn't opened, so they looked more like this one. I think the spruce cones look a bit like pangolin scales, if you can see that. I don't know. Anyway, there's lots of seeds coming out. Yeah, so there's this little baby one, and I don't know if you can see the seeds very well at all, but they kind of look like, here's some from the bigger cones. They look a bit, yeah, it's like the seed inside a thin papery kind of shell that like spins or like gets distributed by the wind, I guess. Yeah. Then I guess we have this one, which is again a bigger cone. Might make some interesting noises. I quite like that actually. Yeah, I quite like how, I don't know, I feel like the scales look quite papery or flimsy, I guess, but they're actually quite robust. Yeah. This is what it looks like from the back. I'm trying very hard. I have very minimal lights and my room is quite dark generally, in terms of film lighting. But yeah, I hope you can see okay. And then finally, this big, huge one, which again is leaking seeds. I do like how it gets higher in pitch as the scales get smaller. Yeah. Oh, the lights are really gone. Yeah, what a handsome little cone. They're kind of like petals. The scales of the cone are kind of the equivalent of like flower petals, at least visually. So yeah, spruce. I just wanted to look in the book to see what it says about spruces. Again, I don't know what specific type of spruce these cones belong to. Anyway, so the spruces, about 40 species, are an uncomfortable bunch. specific the times at which specific cones fall, but I know that fir trees, you rarely see whole cones on the floor because they actually start to like disintegrate while they're on the tree, and so you only ever get like the scales. I wish I had an example. I feel like I do somewhere, but I can't remember where it is. Anyway, let me get a picture from the book. So just a random example of a fir. The cones look like this, and they're quite like densely stacked scales. Again, here's another one. And I don't know if you can see there, but the scales are kind of, when I've seen them, they look a bit smoother than this, so it might have been a different tree, but they're quite, I don't know what that shape is. It looks a bit like a manta ray or something. Yeah. Okay, next, let's talk about these cypress cones. Again, I don't know what type of cypress these are from, and they could all be from different ones. I don't think it's a Lawson cypress, because I was looking in the book earlier and it said that Lawson cypress cones are only like pea-sized, and these are bigger than that. Anyway, I enjoy how spherical these are, and the way that they like open out is very intriguing to me, because I feel like most other cones kind of start from like a point and then like have layers upwards, right? Whereas this just seems like it's kind of just got a centre and then like bits that come up. I'm not explaining this very well. Anyway, there's that. There are like, I think it's Lawson cypresses that I dislike, or at least some of the cultivars. There's something about how like, I feel like some of them look quite dreary. And I guess I've seen some that are potentially not like super well kept, and it just looks a bit rough in my opinion. But there are some that have really lovely like flat sprays. Flat sprays of needles, and I think those are quite aesthetically pleasing to look at. For example, yeah, so like here, this is like Lawson cypresses. I feel like they're quite overbearing. They're very dark brown. I think this one, when you can see like some of the sections of the branch are like naked. I don't know. It's not my favourite looking tree, essentially. Ones that have like flatter sprays like that, I think they look really cool. I guess because the pattern's quite pretty, in my opinion. Anyway, enough about cypresses. Let's move on. Oh, yeah, before we move on to these middle ones, there's this lovely, beautiful cone, which I think don't want to destroy it too much because it feels quite fragile. Yeah, so then onto this middle section. So all of these were from France. I spent some time in Bordeaux and I brought back some plant paraphernalia. I enjoyed how they looked and I wanted to collect them, I guess. So first is just these sweet chestnuts. Yeah, not much to say about them really. I think I was very taken with the way that they're striped, which I doubt you're going to be able to pick up on the camera. You can kind of see it. Yeah, and when I first got them, obviously like when they're like fresh, they were super shiny as well, which was very pleasing to look at. The place I was staying in Bordeaux, it was just outside of Bordeaux actually, in a town called Pessac. And like the tram is like the main, yeah, the tram was very convenient, and along the tramway in Pessac, or like leading up to Pessac, it was very like super green, like loads of trees. It was really pretty, and there were lots of sweet chestnuts and oak trees lining it, like big tall ones. And I was there in the autumn, so people were out collecting the sweet chestnuts when they'd fallen. I don't think I've ever actually eaten sweet chestnuts. I do enjoy the way that sweet chestnuts look. I love how the leaves are like serrated and super big as well. Yeah, then we have, can we get a zoom? Yeah, these acorns. I have more caps than acorns because by the time I got round to collecting them, I think most of the actual acorns had been eaten by presumably squirrels, but could have been other stuff. And I just love the pattern. I think it's really cool and extremely pretty, and I was taken with how big they are, because I feel like, and also round, because in the UK I feel like we get a lot of English oaks and they tend to have a more elongated acorn, more like, what's the 3D of an oval? More like an oval shape rather than a circular shape. Yeah, and these were from, there was a park just by the place where I was living. I had a lake and there were lots of these. I believe that these are scarlet oak acorns. And then I also have these two little ones. I believe these are pin oak acorns. I just loved how round and small they were and pointed. And also the striping I thought was really beautiful. Yeah, the stripes, very cool. I found these, it was like another forest. There were lots of like random forests relatively close to where I was. So I like walked to various places and walked around. And these were from just outside of there. and it also hasn't opened. It's very spiky. I don't know if you can tell from the side angle. It's a very spiky one, and I loved how big it was as well. Yeah, again, this is from one of my walks in Bordeaux in a forest, and I found this big cone on the floor, and I couldn't resist, essentially. And then finally, from my time in Bordeaux, is this absolutely gigantic cone. And I think I identified it as a stone pine, and these were all over like the roads, just the streets. They're quite short trees. Let me look I'll check, but I think probably only about 4 or 5 meters in height. But they were, yeah, like I said, just like lining the roads. I don't know if this is where pine nuts come from, but I do know that you can eat the seeds. And I did want to I've got some, instead of trying to price them out of some of the seeds, which are quite stainy, but I think if you crack these open, they're also very dark. If you crack them open, I think there's like little pine nuts inside that you can eat. I haven't eaten any because I couldn't really be bothered, but yeah. And then also I just have like a singular scale that I broke off. I think it's really cool, like just how woody it is and just how big it is. I was just obsessed. I had this like right from the start. I was just like, this is like the size of my head almost. It's like almost the size of my hand. It's crazy. Well, it is the size of my hand essentially. Yeah, extremely impressive to me. Next, we can talk about sequoias, I guess. There are 3 types of sequoia trees. 3. There is Sequoia sempervirens, which is also called the coast redwood. Sequoia dendron giganteum, which is the giant sequoia, and then Metasequoia glyptostroboides. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, but that's also called the dawn redwood, and I think that one is originally from China. I have cones, many cones, from, these are Wellingtonia, so Sequoia dendron giganteum cones. I don't have any cones to show you from sempervirens trees, but I think they are similar to these, but smaller. I really love sequoia cones. I like how they're like very diamond shaped. They sound quite nice too. Yeah, what can I say about this? When I was gonna do another tree video, like my first one, and when I was researching for that, in the book, I thought it was quite amusing that he described the cones for this tree and for the sempervirens tree as disappointing and unimpressive. And I was kind of offended by that because I think they're great cones. I guess what he might have meant is just like, because of the size of the tree, you'd expect the cones to be huge, but they're actually relatively, these are quite big to be honest. those are the seeds that are inside the cone. And then we have an abundance of metasequoia cones. I've only recently discovered what these look like. My brother went somewhere, I can't remember where he found them, but he came back with them, and I don't think this lighting is ideal to observe that. They are like this really stunning sort of grey colour on the outside, but then the inside is kind of this purplish red, and I think it's really beautiful. You can kind of see the coloration that I was talking about. So Metasequoia glyptostropoides is like smaller relative to the other redwoods, and it's actually a deciduous tree, so it drops its needles in during winter and then they regrow. We went to like a garden place, like a botanical garden kind of place, and they had like the biggest metasequoia trees that I've seen, and they were only like 70 years old, I think, 70 or 50, but they were so big, and I was surprised because all of the metasequoia trees I've seen in other places are quite like small and spindly, but these ones were big and very impressive, and I enjoyed sitting next to them. Then on to what I believe are all large cones. I'm not sure about this one because it does look different from the others in that it's just a bit bigger. I'm going to zoom back in. I think this is a large one. I know that these little ones are because we were there the other day, and yeah, so larches, the European, I don't know if these are European larches actually, the cones might be a bit small for that. I love large cones. Again, it's kind of like a spruce, but I think the shape is, I think because they are smaller, there is something cypresses are also deciduous, and they have very bright green foliage as well when it's in, which is lovely. Okay, so we're coming up to the end. I'm going to show you just these random pine cones first. Yeah, so these are just like, I want to say Scots pine. I think this one probably is because I picked this up the other day and there was definitely a Scots pine tree there. But I could be wrong. This is just like standard pine cone. You can see the similarities with this big one. Pine cones tend to have these like thick woody scales, I guess. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, for the cones, I've got these two Douglas fir cones, which is exciting. There's one that we saw in someone's front garden, and I perhaps cheekily picked some of the cones off the floor outside. And I do love Douglas fir cones. Is that a seed? Oh, we got a seed, guys. That's exciting. Again, I'll show you the seed. Bloody hell. It's similar to the spruce ones. Yeah, Douglas fir cones are very cool because they're kind of like a spruce, but they have this extra little bit that's like got this three-pronged thing, which I'm sure does have a name. According to the book, it's just called a three-pronged cone bract. I think it's a really cool looking cone. Douglas firs, 5 species, have foliage most like that of the silver firs, but the suckers are tiny and only evident when a leaf is pulled off.